Your Creative Push, episode 326.
We have the ability to change the course of our lives whenever we want. It's just about really kind of connecting to that internal compass and honoring it and really feeling it within the depths of ourselves. And we can change. We can change.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngmin Brown, and my guest today is Teresa Coulter. Teresa is an artist from Calgary, Canada, who is known for her Abstract Expressionism. She's also been a primary care paramedic since 2000, and she uses her art to build resilience in the first responder community. And she's won some awards for forging new pathways to address the social stigmas associated with mental health in the workplace, like the ATB Financial Healing through the Arts Award, the Hometown Hero Award, and a Public Service Award through TEMA. And she comes on the show today to talk about her artistic journey, how she got into emergency services but always had a desire towards creativity, how she became a nude model because she wanted to see herself through somebody else's eyes, and how she uses her art to help her interpret the world and to interpret PTSD. Teresa shares the experience of opening up and cleaning her, quote, sock drawer, and the series that led to, and the vulnerability that holds us back from asking for help. She also talks about how creativity allows us to be present in the moment, the idea of your mind being a garden, and the power of the story that we tell ourselves and the boxes that we put ourselves in. And then we go deep, and it gets a little bit heavy as we talk about PTSD, about suicide, and how people can have more comfortable and safe conversations about struggles with mental illness. Talking about some of these things is a little bit uncomfortable, but I think it's very necessary to talk about mental health and to hear about what you can do as well. And it's not all doom and gloom because everything brightens up with Teresa's final push. So please enjoy my in-depth conversation with Teresa Coulter. Teresa, welcome to Your Creative Push.
Thank you for having me, Youngman.
Oh, thanks for being here. I've been looking forward to this for a while because we had a conversation quite some time ago and scheduled this kind of far out into the distance. So I've been really looking forward to speaking with you.
Yeah, me too. I love what you do, and I'm honored to be here. So thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. As you know, I always like to start out by giving my guests the floor to kind of share your story, how you got to the point you are today in your life and creatively speaking.
Yes, it is an interesting path. And I mean, we all have interesting journeys that bring us to this place. But, after high school, I had an opportunity to I had an honorary acceptance to Lethbridge College of Art and Design, and also had this passion for helping people. And so my parents, I think at the time, were a little bit nervous about artists and if I could create a sustainable career and take care of myself. So they, as parents do, tried to protect me and pushed me or encouraged me to go into emergency services. And that's where I've been for almost 20 years now, but always had a desire and this pull towards creativity. So about, I would say, almost 10 years ago, I started to dip my toes back into art and picked it up as a hobby, went to some adult night classes, and I actually became a nude model and would sit for these incredible artists here in Calgary. And my intention behind that was I wanted to see myself through somebody else's eyes. A photograph captures 1 second, but when you're sitting for an artist, there is multiple seconds that are passing and being captured into one final product. And there was just something so magical, I guess, about it. This collection of a person in one final product or painting. And I don't know, there's this exchange or connection that's created in that process. And it hooked me right away. So I started asking the artist that was painting me, like, what do you see? Like, what is your process? And I was essentially interviewing them to a point where they would just take me under their wing and started mentoring me to paint myself. And so that's kind of where I started onto the path of painting and falling in love with it. It was a hobby at the time, but about a year and a half ago, I quit my full-time job, dropped down my hours to part-time, and started living a creative life.
I love how you kind of put yourself back in there in a different way, put yourself in there by being the model, and then took that opportunity to talk to the artist and kind of use their knowledge and to tap that resource. We were just talking with Jason Pollins, and he was talking about, how he loves when his students aren't afraid to ask questions, when they're not afraid to really dig deep and not be feeling like a nuisance, because there is like that connection that can be made when you just have a discussion about art. And kind of one of the cool things about this podcast is just by the conversation, two people can, whether you're kind of ahead of the other person or not, you can kind of both be inspired and just actively thinking about this kind of creative thing,
It's an exchange of life. You're sharing your story with somebody, and it's funny that you mentioned that, because just asking a question, like, how do we get over just this simple act of asking a question? And it puts you in a vulnerable place. It's just the same as asking for help surrounding mental health and these types of things, which is another fusion of my passions, and using art as a way to advocate for just advocation in general, whatever it is that you're passionate about, using your art as a way to spread awareness or to help educate or these types of things. How do we get over that act of asking for help, for, information? What is that fear that holds us back from doing that? And it's vulnerability. It's this vulnerability that, oh, maybe they're going to think something of me, or I'm, not as good as them. I'm a burden to them. This self-limiting talk that we create holds us back.
No, I agree completely. And I think mental health and mental awareness is something that's so not talked about, and kind of like artistic resistances. That's the reason I started this podcast. It's just something that we kind of hold to ourselves and are afraid to talk about because there's stigma involved, and also maybe feelings of embarrassment or just not being completely understood. And I know that that's something that you are really taking to the streets, so to speak, with mental health awareness. So could you talk about kind of your journey with that?
Yeah, stigma. This is a very overarching, scary word, I think, just like any other word surrounding mental health. And so in 2000, and my memory is really not good as a residual effect of things, but 2014, I was had responded to a call in my life as a paramedic, primary care paramedic, and I afterwards was experiencing things that I hadn't experienced up until that point in my career. And 20 years under my belt, I knew that something was wrong, but I didn't really understand what was wrong. And there just wasn't access to information, and mental health and well-being wasn't really something spoken about. We talked a lot about back injuries and shoulder injuries and physical ailments caused by the job, but mental health wasn't really a word or a topic that was used in my whole career up until that point. And so I started hearing this word be used often, post-traumatic stress disorder. And I was like, what is that? What is it? And it's not like you could go around asking people, hey, could you explain to me what post-traumatic stress disorder is? And do you have it? And what does it look like? And all of these things. So as a way to find out more, which I often do, is use my art to interpret the world. And it's a way of me being able to integrate all of this stimulus outside internally, and then the art reflects it back to me so that I can learn a lesson from whatever those experiences are. And I think that I was really curious about finding out more about mental health. So I put out a Facebook post and just asked people just flat out, which took a lot to do before I pushed the enter button. Is anyone suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder that's a first responder? And would you come and sit in my studio for 4 hours and let me paint you? And so it kind of went back to those lessons I learned as a model, and the experience of being seen and witnessed, and providing a space to collaborate in this interesting way of sharing our experiences. So I decided that I would paint one painting per month for a year, so 12 total. And I wanted to have 6 females and 6 males. They had to be first responders, and they had to know about post-traumatic stress disorder, whether it was a diagnosis or it was something that they were being treated for, or these types of things. So I found 12 of them, and they would come into my studio and sit for 4 hours and share themselves completely. The beautiful part about people sitting for you is you can't hold a smile for 4 hours. So this mask that we put up to be accepted into our community and our worlds was removed, and the raw vulnerability of themselves kind of came out. After the first one, I realized, oh my goodness, I'm over my head. I'm afraid of re-injuring these people because of the raw emotions that they shared with me, which I had never really experienced outside of my uniform. You know, we walk into traumatic situations constantly as first responders in a uniform, but it's a shield of protection almost, where you disassociate, you walk in, you have protocols to follow. People's, are experiencing the worst day of their lives and in suffering. And so I've experienced human suffering in that perspective, but really not with my peers and our emotions and the emotional responses that our job has had. So over that year, I really dove into learning more and understanding how to create a safe space to hold my peers in this painting project that I had created. Eventually, I had names and titles for this series, which was like Painting Paramedic's Pain and being super cliche like that. And then one of the sitters actually said to me, he said, after every bad call, after every bad shift, we go home and we take off our dirty work socks. We roll them up into a ball and we shove them into a sock drawer. Over time, if we're not dealing with those socks, those dirty memories, the sock drawer gets so full that it doesn't close, and then it just starts spilling over into our lives. And that's where I got the title for the series, was called Sock Drawer Stories.
Wow, that's a powerful image too, and that, it's something that everybody has, whether it's really stressful images and scenes and interactions like you have, or so many other people, great Americans have, great people in the world have, or it's just the daily stress of life, or not having that conversation you need to with your wife, or letting drama build up with a friend, and that all just builds up, and like you said, it spills over. You need to kind of start taking those socks out.
Yeah, and cleaning them, right? And
absolutely.
It was interesting. That series really propelled me forward into understanding wellness. So the initial study, essentially, through that year of experience and research and learning, was so we have these boxes inside of us. We have these drawers. And you're right, stressful events go in here, and maybe, spouse event, like significant other events go here. So what do we do once they get really full? And how do we keep them empty so that we can be receiving these experiences in our lives and then be able to have room to process them or let them sit there? and deal with the situation at hand, but also then remove them and clean them and let them go and recycle them back into our lives as experiences, because those experiences will make us stronger.
And did you find that the sock drawer series and doing these series of paintings and having these conversations in order to learn about PTSD, did that help you to kind of clean your sock drawer?
100%. It made me realize I had a sock drawer.
Yeah.
And for sure, I think my series initially started with an inquiry for myself, what was happening to me through others' experiences. I have a huge value in this social connection that we can make with each other and learning through those experiences. So yeah, I ended up realizing that the job had been affecting me quite substantially. And maybe not that my sock drawer was overflowing, but it really, really pushed me to say, oh, hi, I have a sock drawer. Yeah, it's pretty full, like it's time to take some of that stuff out and create better health in my life. So, some things like just general education. But it was funny. I started taking some online assessments just to be like, where's my head at? And it was just like this resound. Like I don't tell anybody to go and self-diagnose themselves, but it was just like constantly the same kind of like online diagnosis. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe I need to see somebody. So the first psychologist that I went to, I didn't get along with. A couple things I wasn't ready to share fully everything and be vulnerable. So I spent a lot of money, and I think it just locked my sock drawer closed even further. Then I found another one that was really good. So that is my recommendation to others who, want to kind of open their sock drawers. The first psychologist or mental health professional that you go to may not be the right fit for you, and that's okay. Like, just say, oh, it wasn't a connection. It's not going to work. Go to the next one and search for one that aligns with your values and speaks a language that lands with you. I ended up, the working diagnosis for my psychologist was post-traumatic stress disorder. And it was caused from not just one event, but multiple events associated with the career that I, have been in for almost 20 years now. And it's like 1 in 3 people in Canada, so I'm from Calgary, Canada, will experience mental illness in their lifetime. So that's not saying that you'll have your mental illness as a diagnosable illness for your whole life, but at some point in your life, you will kind of hit these markers or whatever. And for first responders, it's like 44%.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the general population is like 10, and first responders, so corrections, EMS, police, fire, it's almost 44% will test positive at this time with their most recent study for a diagnosable illness of post-traumatic stress disorder, depression or anxiety or substance abuse. That's only the people that know the symptoms or feel able to be vulnerable and go to that place and open that sock drawer and say, yeah, I've got that, I've got that, I've got that. There's a lot of people that are still in denial and avoidance of where they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I consider you to be a hero, and first responders and police officers and everybody to be such heroes, because you're not only putting yourself in vulnerable situations and helping the world, by the way, as you're doing it, but also you're risking your mental health. You are putting your brain and your mind through these like you said, it's like the worst day for a lot of people, and you're experiencing that over and over again. So it's like such a heroic endeavor, I think, to be a first responder, to do what you do.
Thank you. It's hard as a first responder to receive that because, I think it's an alignment of passion and interest. And so I often say, like, I'm amazed that I've been able to find a career where I can be this passionate about and receive this much reward from. Knowing that you can help in some way is so much reward, and to be paid to do it, which is great too.
Yeah, it's necessary.
Yeah, it is. But I agree. And to tell you the truth, because first responders are the first people to approach somebody in the most traumatic event of their lives, there is some skills that we need. At the time, we do need to have this skill of disassociating and go back to our protocols and our training and get through that call. But we also need a safe space afterwards, I think, to learn how to clean our sock drawers. But I really, truly believe that if we start arming and equipping first responders with how to process trauma and these types of events and integrate that into their being, we're going to be able to help our general population. We'll be more compassionate towards, mental health in our general population as well. And in turn, that's just going to be good for everybody. So my art project that I did in 2014, Sock Drawer Stories, I started to shift some of the conversations here locally for me in Calgary, and ended up going national across Calgary or Canada. I had documentary film crews wanting to come to Calgary and do a documentary, and it hit the news, and it started to kind of stir up some stuff. And this is something that I love about art is I don't paint for people to love everything that I do. And I actually appreciate if somebody is strongly disgusted by my art or has some type of an aversion to it, or it creates some uncomfortable sensations or feelings or thoughts. And because that's an internal perspective of what they're seeing, and that lives within them. So it kind of pulls it and bubbles it up to the surface. And I hope that then there's an inquiry, like, why do I feel that way? Or whatever, right? So this is the beautiful thing about art, is that we can create beautiful things that feel nice, but art can also be this way of stirring up shit, really. And I think that's what Sock Drawer Stories did, is it stirred up this, still pool of water that wasn't doing anything. And I can say now in 2018 that there are so many more resources. There's a lot more education in the first responder community, and people are talking about it. And not that I was the one caveat that tipped that point. There was a lot of factors coming into it, but using art as a way to stir up that shit is really good.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
That really is the role of art, right? It's like to stir up conversations in yourself first, figure out like, what's going on inside of you, like what's going on inside of your drawers, and kind of bringing them out, and hopefully being vulnerable enough to bring them out in like a kind of honest way. And then the second part of that then is sharing that out so that conversation can start in other people. So you can stir up shit with other people and have them start kind of looking inward to themselves. It's like the beautiful thing about art, and I think sort of like the responsibility as well of artists, of creative people, of human beings, really.
For sure. Art is this really incredible thing that you can use for change. And we need it in our lives. I mean, lots of people, art foundations and societies know this, right? So everybody needs to create in general, because this is how we bind and bond and create change and advance things that we don't know about either. So, there's a access to vulnerability that is achieved through art that can enhance our culture and society, from every person sharing their story in their own creative way. And it's without words. So this was something really fascinating for me to learn about art and the process and using it as medication for, mental health, is that our prefrontal cortex, which is the area of the brain that kind of has words and reasoning and language centers of the brain actually shut down if you are in post-traumatic stress, if you have a post-traumatic stress disorder.
Really?
And so you can't even really access words to explain what's happening to you or what you're feeling. You go into your survival brain. Yeah.
Wow.
And so what better way to access than through art without words?
Right.
I think it's just like a beautiful compliment to any professional thing. In Quebec here in Canada, psychologists are prescribing gallery visits to their patients.
What? That's awesome.
Yeah, dude. They collaborated with the art gallery in Quebec, and yeah, that's what they're doing. Mental health professionals are prescribing on a little sheet of paper, go to an art gallery.
That is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and that makes so much sense too. When, people can't find the words after going through something like that, it's just like impossible for them to share. Wow. What better way than through, like you said, through the art.
Yeah. And I think we aren't really tapping into all of the potential that art has. So in 2010, when I first came to Calgary and started sitting as a model and then being mentored by the artists that I was sitting for, I wanted to create a group. And so I'm the co-founding member of a little group here in Calgary called Go Figure. When I was sick, I didn't visit as much, but it's still going strong. So it's 10 years of these people meeting every week and hiring a model to sit for them. And there's usually about 7 people and of all different calibers of skill level and professionalism and, new people just exploring figure painting. And we talk about really hard life things. And that community is so, so valuable and so, so very important to find your tribe and to hash out these things. I often, internet is good at getting your work out there, but there's something being lost, I think, that increases anxiety and depression is this loss of community and connection. I was reading an article saying that millenniums, instead of going to their elders, go to the internet and Google a blog that was written by a 20-year-old on how to have a great marriage for 50 years. And I'm just like, why aren't we going to our elders? Like the 90-year-old woman that lives down the street. Why are we disregarding them as a source of information, of lived experience? I mean, they're 90, they've got a lot of lived experience. So we need to start using art as a way to connect these people. I was ranting with this group yesterday that, I'm going to do a monthly drop-in at the old folks home with a bunch of artists and old people and pair them one-on-one. And we'll start doing portrait drawings of these people in these homes.
That's such a good idea.
Right? Who wants to get on board with that? It's an idea right now, but it could be a reality. And I think it would be beautiful to sit with your elders, and maybe they need to speak. Maybe they don't need to speak. Maybe it's just about being present with them and appreciating them and being grateful of all of the things that they've encountered.
Yeah, you should do that for sure.
Okay.
And
thanks,
well,
Emily.
Absolutely. I co-sign. I agree.
Okay, wonderful.
But it's so true, and it's something that I'm trying to figure out. I think a lot of people are trying to figure out, but it's becoming a theme of this show, is like how to navigate the world in the internet age. And it is such a shame, like while Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and all of these things allow us to connect with people across the world, it also kind of disconnects us from the people that are like next door. And that's why I love what you're doing, like to be able to sit and have a conversation for 4 hours with somebody and really connect to them one-on-one. The phone is away and you're just having a conversation, like you can dig into and, get into things that help both you and them and learn about somebody. And that's why I love podcasting as well. My favorite podcast is the Joe Rogan Experience, and he has 3-hour conversations. And like, that's where you're able to really like figure out an issue. That's where you're able to have a back and forth dialogue to change your opinion on things, rather than just jumping on Facebook and seeing something that you don't like that somebody said and just putting in your 2 cents that they're not even going to listen to, and they're just going to respond to. Like, I don't know. We need to have more of these like sit down things, where whether it's with a 90-year-old or with somebody that's struggling with PTSD, or just somebody that you can learn from, an expert in a field. Just like, that's what we need to be focusing on more. And I don't know how to get there, but except for creating more podcasts. But
well, and there's so much science. So this is the geek behind me as a first responder, as a primary care paramedic. It's like, I need to know the science, like things need to be, figured out before I do this. And that was really, hard for me to come out of. And this is reflective in my last series. I did a series of figures and boxes, and the boxes are to represent these boundaries we put on ourselves, and it isolates us from connection and the world, and exploring that kind of stuff. So I think there's polyvagal theory that talks about just tonality of voice. Having a phone conversation can really change your chemistry and the way your body's responding to stress. There's small muscles within the face of a mother when they're looking at their child that can calm and soothe that child. And so we are learning and developing in this world, and we're missing that with social media. And podcasts are huge for, enhancing that connection, just hearing people speak. The one thing I think that we often miss when we're supporting those with mental illness is, it's often referred to as an invisible disorder or disease or injury. And sometimes people just need to have a witness to what they're experiencing. And as the artist who is painting a sitter, there's this beautiful, untapped thing of being able to witness this invisibility that in their mind they think only is in their head. And that was common theme throughout Sock Drawer Stories and other projects that I've done. You saw what I was experiencing, and sometimes it's not about having the right response or knowing what to say. It sometimes is, I don't know what to say, but I'm here and I see you. I see. That's why there's an untapped potential with art, I think, in the healing modality that exists. Art is also this way of being mindful. So I love painting from still life, but I'm sure the same thing is achieved when you're painting from a photograph. Is you really can't be anywhere else. You have to be present in your body, seeing, viewing what's in front of you to translate that onto the canvas. And so that activation, that process of being present here in the now is being reaffirmed while you're painting. They use cognitive behavioral therapy and mindfulness and meditation, but art has that component built right into that activation or active, and I'm sure most things, music, writing, it's this discovery, this way of integrating your experiences into your whole self.
Right. And for me, I struggle with meditation because I'm too in my head. I'm too okay, I'm meditating. All right, time to calm down. Oh, there's a thought. Okay, let it go. I struggle with that. But then when I'm writing, I can get into the zone. And I think that's the same for artists, that you're there, like you said, and you have no choice but to just create art on the canvas. And then you can get into those calming mental states as well, where it's just you figuring yourself out, or you just being not figuring yourself out, perhaps turning your brain off.
Right.
So I think that's huge.
Creating a safe space just to be, right? When from mental illness, anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress, you're so much in this like fear response in your body. Your body is not registering the external environment correctly because of the lenses that you have as you're viewing the world. But when you paint or you're creative in some way, you are sitting and feeling safe within your body. Or maybe you're not feeling safe, but you're at least honoring that and learning to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, which breaks it up and stirs up that shit, right? That uncomfortable stuff, and maybe starts to create a little bit of room for possibility of something else where you can start planting a new seed. It's funny when you speak about meditation, because I did a series called Mind Garden, and it was my way of exploring meditation and what that meant and what that looked like. Those thoughts of, oh, I should be doing something else. Oh, like, why am I sitting here? This doesn't make sense. Or, those uncomfortable, repetitive kind of record player thoughts. That's just part of it. Sitting with that and just being like, oh, hi, I see you. You exist. I'm going to pick you out because I don't want you anymore, and I'm going to send you away. And it's a mind gardening experience. So it's like that internal place that is our true self is a garden, and it's about picking the weeds that don't want anymore, and it's about planting the flowers or trees that you want to have in your garden. And weeds grow back, right? Especially if they've been there a long time. So you can spend your whole life picking the same weed. But, as you pick that weed, it creates a little bit more space to plant a new seed. And hopefully the good seeds choke out all the bad.
Right. Well, what are some of your weeds then, like when you're actually getting to the art and you have these thoughts like, oh, I need to be at work in an hour, or I need to, fill in the blank. I'm sure there's a million. What are some of the things that you have to kind of find yourself constantly pruning?
Oh, all of the big ones. Like, I'm a failure. I don't think, or I'm no good at this. This sucks. Will I ever get better? I don't know what I'm doing. Like all of them. They're all there. But I'm so much kinder to them now. That's one way to get past some of those creative blocks, right? Because that record player, if it gets loud enough, it will stop you from all of those things. And there's a lot of creative blocks too, like, oh, artists are supposed to struggle, or all artists struggle. Well, that's a creative block, right? That holds you back from really pushing yourself forward. It would be the same as saying, like, every paramedic is going to get PTSD. Well, no, that's a block. And how can we navigate those kind of blocks? And it's about starting to show kindness. And, well, is there a way of creating an opportunity for that not to happen? So for artists that are supposed to be poor, like, that's a block, that's a stigma, that's something the exterior world threw up there, and you at one point it landed, and it just it's a weed that sat there, and you just haven't really picked it out or created, the opposite kind of ideas.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does. I'm a big believer in not necessarily like The Secret, but I do believe that, like, you become what you tell yourself you are. So if you have that belief that, all artists are supposed to be poor, you're gonna be poor.
Right.
Or if you have that belief that, okay, I'm only supposed to make $50,000 a year, you're going to get a job where you only make $50,000 a year, $20,000 a year. Like, you define like the number that you fit into. It's the same for output. It's the same for, like, how much art you create, how much you write, how much you eat, how much you exercise. It's like all kind of the story that you tell yourself, and you just continue to live that narrative.
100%. You just described the last series of the females in the boxes. Those boxes are all of those defining things that we've set in stone as what is. And so how do we start moving outside of those boxes? there's a artist that is part of this Go Figure group, and we were having a small conversation, and he's just like, oh, I'll put my art out there when it's better. Why? Wait.
Right.
People want to see your growth. Like, there's something really beautiful in this process of growing. Why wait until you think that you're good enough? Because that'll never be achieved.
Absolutely. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah. Where you are right now is the best that you've been able to give. And that is to be honored and respected and celebrated. And the next one is going to change. Like, I don't have a particular style. I really, truly paint in these series of exploration of my external world. So it's constantly changing. I'll paint portraits for, like a year, and then I'll go and move into figure drawing, and then another way of wanting to express, and I'll create something else. And I'm growing, I'm learning. And as soon as I stop, I might as well be dead, because this world has so many incredible things to learn. So we just got to be kind and let our growth develop naturally. I don't think you can force that.
Yeah, that's one of the most dangerous things you can say is, I'll do X when I'm good enough, when I'm better. And X is, whatever, it's sharing my work, or, approaching galleries, or trying to sell my work, or tons of different things that you can kind of limit yourself by. But you're never going to be good enough, or you're never going to be better, because as you're progressing, as you're getting better, your version of better gets even more better, because you don't actually recognize when you've reached that imaginary point that you said, a year ago, if I continue to practice and get better, like, you don't actually realize it, because you're living that narrative. You are in the act of getting better, and you're just like in the middle of this point where behind you is worse and ahead of you is better. Like, and it's always going to be there for the rest of your life, like, no matter what. And if you reach this point where you're like, oh, okay, I reached this point where I'm the best, like, no, now you're probably a psychopath.
Right. The scariest part is we can pick. I think you said it so perfectly. Like, when you were explaining these boundaries, these self-limiting beliefs actually shape our future. Mm-hmm. If we're visualizing what the future looks like, we've already created our future, because that's the energy that we're pushing into where we'll be. So if you're constantly saying to yourself, I'll never be in a gallery, you've already created that reality, and it hasn't even happened yet. And this is how come it's so important just to really be present and live in the moment. When I was doing Soccer Stories, or actually any of the projects that I've done, for example, this most recent one, I partnered up with Calgary Police Department here on a suicide awareness conference that they were having. And, it started over a conversation, and we were ranting about ideas, and I said, how can I contribute? I'd love to be a part of the conference in some way. And he's like, well, why don't you paint a painting? And so we collaborated, and, we were discussing some ideas and concepts. And so I came out with this painting of 8 first responders on 2 canvases. And I never in my mind could have imagined that it is now sitting at one of the EMS stations as a way of proactively raising awareness and having a conversation about mental health. Like, in my workplace, they allowed me to show my art about suicide. 4 years ago, there's no way I would have seen that happening.
That's incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so funny too, because, well, it's not funny, but sometimes these kind of self-limiting beliefs, or stories or narratives that you put for yourself, that you give to yourself, are given to you from a young age from somebody else. Like you said with your parents, they were worried, okay, the life of an artist, I don't know about that. Maybe you should go this other route. This comes up all the time on the podcast, and it was given to me too by my parents. Or, you can't live the life of your dreams because somebody tells you that those, are just dreams, like that you can't actually make it as an artist. You're like, okay, you're right. And then all the time, everybody circles back to art, like they need to come back to the thing that really speaks to them, the thing that they're really supposed to do. It sucks that it has to be a circuitous route sometimes, but yeah.
Well, you've essentially described the stigma surrounding mental illness, and the stigmas in general, they're planted from, childhood, from social media. Like, we have to be careful how much we are exposing ourselves to social media, because it influences us so deeply without even really thinking about it. So it's important to see that conversations and topics, what are you being influenced by, and what are you going to do with that? Whereas if you just kind of let it sit on the floor, it'll jump up and bite you later on, right? And it's, as a parent, my parents only did it out of love and compassion, for sure. Them wanting to kind of direct and steer me towards a career that I could be sustainable in, and have a life that I could provide for myself and stuff like that. But who's to say that art, if I started then, couldn't have done that? What do we need to create these opportunities for people to see their full potential in that? I don't know. It's interesting. I go back to Bob Ross. So Bob Ross is somebody it's been circulating my radar lately. The painter Bob Ross.
Oh, love him. I could sit there all day and just listen to him and watch him.
So did you know that he was in the military for 20 years before he was an artist?
No way. Really?
Yeah, dude. You should see pictures of him as a military man. And then he was actually a sergeant. And his job was essentially yelling constantly at everybody around him. And he said essentially that he never wanted to yell again. And so that's when he started painting happy little pictures.
Oh my God. That's incredible.
So this is we have the ability to change the course of our lives whenever we want. It's just about really kind of connecting to that internal compass and honoring it, and really, feeling it within the depths of ourselves. And we can change. We can change, transform.
I agree. And everybody has it in themselves to change their narrative, to change, how they approach life, kind of the life that they're living, how they interact with the world around them. Like, everybody has that choice, and it's just a matter of making it.
Yeah. And art is a great way to figure it out.
Yes, art. Yay, art.
I know. We went into the deep philosophical things that actually inspire my art. So thank you for this conversation.
Oh, cool. Very cool. I wanted to circle back to the story of sitting down with that first person, the first person that was sitting for you for your sock drawers series. How you said you realized that you were in the deep end, and you needed to, really rethink how you approach and talk to these people so that you don't stir up shit. So too much shit, and you don't make it a negative experience. And I was wondering if you could kind of talk about that, and how people that aren't struggling with mental illness can have a conversation with somebody who is struggling with mental illness, where it becomes a positive thing in that person's life, and a positive conversation. Because I think a lot of times people are too scared to tiptoe around. I know you said it before, it's okay to say, I don't know what you're going through, but I see you, I hear what you're saying, and I'm sorry. How can people have these conversations in a comfortable way?
Yes. This is my new passion, actually, with first responders, is the peer support side of it. So how can we be a good community surrounding mental illness? And the first portrait that I had done, I was so afraid that, I didn't really know what I was getting into. I just knew that I was going to sit with these people and paint them. And I had done that multiple times with other models and stuff like that. But there's a professionalism, right? That's their job. So they come in, they hold their bodies in a certain way, and then you draw them. And this was everybody that came knew what they were coming for. They were coming to like speak about this really uncomfortable thing. And they all had an intention. They wanted to blow it out of the water. They wanted to draw an awareness to what was happening. They wanted change. You know, they wanted better resources for more education surrounding it. They psychologists and everything. But I was really afraid because the first person that came to sit for me, I just wasn't used to the strong emotions that exist because I really wasn't comfortable with my own emotions in a place of vulnerability like that. And it takes a lot to learn how to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. I'm also a yoga teacher and meditation instructor. So I actually took this trauma-informed course through my yoga teaching because it is considered a healing modality. And I used a lot of those things. I translated a lot of those teachings into my studio to hold a safe space. So there's a few things, you know, strong emotions will only last for about 20 minutes. When somebody's in a strong emotional state, their, again, prefrontal cortex is probably offline. So what you say at that time isn't really going to change anything. It's about kind of getting people back into their bodies. So a lot of things I would do that naturally happen when you're setting up a model is, okay, can you tell me where your feet are placed? Just take note of, you know, where your back is touching the chair behind you. Just take note about how your hand is placed on the arm of that chair. All right, now I want you to kind of look at one place in the studio to focus the direction of your head. And it's natural for people to kind of fall out of pose when they're sitting, but those cues can help to get a model back into that space of where they're holding this position. And that's a grounding technique. So it can help people kind of move back into their bodies when they've, you know, kind of gone offline. And so I was kind of, in a way, teaching them how to ground themselves in this space. So if I noticed somebody was getting anxious physically, you can see these things. That's why I think it's so funny that we call it an invisible illness or injury, because you can see their breath starts to quicken. There's tension in the muscles of the face. The pupils dilate. There's like their hands start fidgeting. You can see they're like uncomfortable in their body, just as somebody who broke an arm would look. They're in a state of stress. That stress response is written all over their faces. Just to be witness to that, you know, like we need to start connecting with each other. As an artist, we get to see. That is the skill that we start to develop as artists, is this ability to see. Yeah, so, you know, other things too, if other artists were thinking about doing a project like that, you know, it is really good to take a mental health first aid course, which kind of just gives you the basics of what it looks like, how to respond, and, you know, what kind of things to look for danger, right? So what level are these people in? If people are talking about suicide or extreme hopelessness, that's a kind of a point, or hurting somebody else, you would want to, that's crisis. That's like kind of where you start to tap into emergency services, or, you know, ensuring that the person gets to a professional at that time.
And how do you, in that scenario, just in general for people, if somebody says something like that, yeah, getting them in touch with a mental health professional, yes, that I agree. But, you know, it's the middle of the night and they're talking to you on the phone. What do you do?
Suicide is really quite scary. And I think our first kind of reaction when we hear somebody talking about wanting to harm themselves, or they have nothing to live for anymore, and you've kind of noticed over time that there's been a decline in their mood or just their ability to take care of themselves or manage their stress, and they're talking about suicide, you want to ask them, like, are you thinking of suicide or harming yourself? you don't want to use words that are kind of around. You want to actually directly ask somebody, like, are you thinking of suicide? And sometimes I think for me, I've seen a relief when I've asked somebody if they're thinking of that, and they're like, yes. And at that point, that becomes an emergency. That's like you're witnessing somebody broke their leg and you want to call emergency services or take somebody immediately to a hospital.
Yeah, I had that happen once before as well. And it's like the scariest situation to be in because you don't, you don't want to be that guy that ruins their life by taking them to the hospital. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
It's like you don't want to be that person that makes that call, but they kind of make the call for you, I guess.
Well, you have to look at it. If somebody is thinking of suicide or has suicidal thoughts or ideations, it is an illness. You are very sick. It would be like a person with asthma that, can't breathe. There's a change in their body. And you're right, it's really, really awkward and feels super uncomfortable when people talk about that. And you're afraid that you're going to hurt them or those types of things.
Whew, it's
intense stuff.
Intense stuff, but I just wanted to take the opportunity, because it's not something that is talked about all the time, and any opportunity to be able to kind of have that discussion so that everybody's kind of prepared to do the right thing, to do the necessary thing, as hard as it might be. I think it's really important. So thank you for giving us that kind of opportunity here.
Yeah, I'm honored that you asked, and I'm very comfortable speaking about this stuff. It is pretty heavy and intense things, but for me, because I'm talking about it all the time, I don't feel the heaviness that other people might be experiencing just even listening to me speak about it. But the thing is, we all take CPR courses, I mean, Canadian Red Cross has done a great job of putting CPR out there, like, 2 breaths, 15 compressions, how to check for a pulse, those types of things. And I really encourage people to take a mental health first aid course. I think there's going to be a lot of information that's going to give you, an understanding from an intelligent perspective, an education perspective, some research on it, and what to do and how to respond. And that's the place where you're going to learn the best.
Absolutely. And we'll have some links in the show notes page for people too, some resources for you to check out if you're interested in doing something like that.
Yeah.
Teresa, it is time for the final push. We'll change things up again, and we'll leave it off in a kind of motivational way. This is where I ask you to reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already inspired today and educated today, and just give them your final words of advice and really push them to pursue their own creative passions.
Tap into the uncomfortable and let it inspire you. All of those things, self-limiting beliefs, all of those things that have influenced you in some way, use that as your direction for change. And maybe it's a small change, like getting your art onto Instagram or getting your art out into the community. Yeah, just use all of that uncomfortable stuff as a source for change and to create something beautiful out of it.
I love it. Be not just comfortable with the uncomfortable, but be inspired by it. I love it.
Yeah.
Teresa, thank you so much for coming on the show today, for sharing your story and for sharing your inspiration. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Youngman, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you. You have inspired me, so we'll see what happens from here.
Yay! Oh, thanks. Okay, cool. And for everybody listening, you can find Teresa on our website, teresacoulter.com. And on Instagram, she is Teresa_Coulter. That's Coulter. But again, we'll have that all linked up at today's show notes page, yourcreativepush.com/326. Teresa, thanks again.
Thanks.
A profound thank you to Teresa for coming on the show today. And I have one major takeaway for you all. I think you know what it's going to be. what I'm going to ask you to do, go try being a nude model. I'm just kidding. Hey, if you want to go try being a nude model, go do that. It's probably not for everybody, but it worked for Teresa to bring her back into the art world. But no, my real takeaway is for you to ask yourself, what is in your sock drawer? What are your dirty socks? It's something that I can't tell you what it is. It's something that you need to dig deep to figure out what you're disassociating yourself from, and how you can use your art to help you through that, to help you discover more about that, and to help you get through it. And of course, thank you to Teresa for talking about some uncomfortable things. But I really do believe that it is important for us to talk about these things, for us to be more aware of mental health and more comfortable talking about and dealing with things like PTSD and things like suicide. We need to help ourselves. We need to help each other. Even in this podcast community, thinking about Nathan Carson, we lost a great member of our family here. And when things like that happen, you ask yourself, what more could I have done? But it really comes down to community. It comes down to being there for one another and being comfortable being there for one another and knowing what to do, what to say. Like Teresa said, just being there, just being a witness. So let's be that for each other. Let's be witnesses for each other. Let's be a community for each other. Because yes, art is a wonderful thing for us to help understand the world or understand things that we are going through. But community is the thing that actually gets us through it. So that's why I really appreciate Teresa coming on the show and sharing her story, sharing what she's doing with her art, and sharing what she's doing with her community. On our next episode, we have Vanessa Vicaria. Vanessa is the founder and CEO of The Math Guru, and she is also the other founding member of Goodnight Sunrise. You might remember that David Kochberg was on the show before, but Vanessa comes on the show for a wide-ranging conversation about many different aspects of creativity and opportunity. If you want to find out more about Vanessa, you can head to goodnightsunrise.com or themathguru.ca. And again, we'll have that all linked up at today's show notes page, yourcreativepush.com/326. But that's all I've got for you today. So hopefully you were inspired to go and get your work done and to go and take care of one another. I love you all so much. Take care of each other. Take care of yourself. And we will see you next time if you need that push again. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.